The Flapper and the Chaperone, Mexican-American Teenagers in the Southwest, by Vicki L. Ruiz, created by Kaytlyn Taylor and Alexandria Wright. And this is Kaytlyn Taylor speaking. The learning objectives for this article include: what consequences did women/girls face if they did not follow the traditions of their families? Basically meaning, what would happen to these girls if they got caught rebelling against the strict traditions placed on them? Then secondly, provide examples of how women would defy the traditions placed on them. Lastly, describe the mindset of Mexican immigrant parents during this time. While describing the mindset of Mexican immigrant parents, keep in mind about the traditions that they had placed on them while growing up and how strict their parents were to them. The thesis was hinted at in the beginning of the article, but then stated again on page 434. The thesis being, in challenging chaperonage, Mexican-American teenagers did not attack the foundations of familial oligarchy, only its more obvious manifestation. This basically means that Mexican-American teenagers still appreciate the traditions of their past and their family and what the traditions of their family uphold, but they don't appreciate the strictness of the traditions placed on them, basically meaning that they still want to live their life to how they want without having these strict restrictions placed on them by their family. The author of the article is Vicki L. Ruiz. She is 65 years old, has been educated at Stanford University, a historian, and also an advocate for the rights of Mexican American women and people. There is a lot of terminology throughout this article, but the few that we have highlighted are chaperonage, which is a chaperone, la dueña, which means the owner, chisme, which means gossip, pachucos is a term to describe young men's fashion, usually Mexican-American men's fashion. Oligarchy is a form of power structure in which the power rests on a small number of people, but usually at the head of the oligarchy is an elder, sometimes it could be the parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, even an aunt or an uncle, depending on who's the oldest and how high of a standard they have and the high respect that they have been given. And then chicanas and chicanos is a term to describe Mexican-American men and women, usually first generation.
Now speaking Alexandria Wright. Evidence. He whipped me anyway. So from then on, whenever I went to the track meet, I used to change my bloomers so that he wouldn't see that I had gone again. Ruiz 4:30. This quote relates to Maria Fierro as used in the text. She talks about how she's assimilating to American culture by going to a track meet, and she facing consequences after returning home. Young women had 3 options. They could accept the rules set down for them, they could rebel, or they could find ways to compromise or circumvent traditional standard. Ruiz 4:31. This quote gave these young women not much of a choice. They could either secretly do things outside of their household, or they could follow the rules at home. Ruiz uses other examples of evidence to support her ideas. An interview with Maria Ibarra, and also a poem. Example: Flapperismo, flapperdom, was no more appreciated by Hispanic guardians of traditional femininity than it was by Anglo-American ones. The flapper and la pelona were both seen as threats to traditional family values. The flapper was women who did not follow societal norms. They rebelled and set a new precedent for the woman who lived in the moment. without worries of what society considered ladylike. Their biggest fault is their anti-domesticity. Flapperismo conflicted with the expected domesticity and modesty for women. The flapper was not seen as a modest figure. It sexualized the woman. It allowed her to rebel in society. It allowed her to be a woman with freedom. Discussion questions. What was the perspective of Mexican immigrant parents who encountered youth culture? What do some girls do secretly unbeknownst to their parents? And how did women view their Mexican traditions? All of these questions are questions to think about. Think about who you are as a person. Think about what traditions that you have in your own home. Things to consider. Student activity. Write a diary entry as if you were a young Mexican American girl in this time period. Describe how you feel. What are your values? What will you do differently with your children? How has this affected your life? Cite examples from the text to support your ideas. Think about the values you have currently. Empathize with these young women. Think about if you had consequences for living a normal life, a life that everyone lives the same. Works cited. In our group, we use two sources. First, from Out of the Shadows, the chapter called The Flapper and the Chaperone, and also the article La Pelona, the Hispanic American Flapper, written by Matthew Wills. And this will conclude our presentation on the Flapper and the Chaperone. Thank you.